Hey, what's going on, guys? So a user on Reddit actually replied to a question that I put out last week. I wanted to know, what do people really want to see from this channel? What kind of value I can bring in the skating world? And this guy has Bandit, perfect name. He left a comment that said, maybe sizing of every skateboard part and what bigger and smaller size does, like wheels, trucks, deck. I know some would help, but I'm sure it would help, blah, blah, blah. So I figured, why don't we just start from the very beginning and explain how different sizing of skateboarding works, and it's probably fitting to start with the skateboard deck. And I think this is a great place to start because this is the first thing that you're going to see when you go to the skate shop, especially if this is the first time you ever buy a skateboard. You're going to want to know these things going into it because there's a ton of different options, right? Now, if you're a complete beginner, you might just want to get a complete skateboard so you don't have to worry about all these different measurements. However, if you really want to get into skateboarding and learn tricks and all that, these measurements are extremely helpful and it can help you save a little bit of money. Okay, so if you're a complete beginner and you have no idea what a skateboard deck is, skateboard deck is simply just the actual plank of wood that you stand on. Some companies make this with Canadian maple wood, some make it with North American maple wood, some companies make it with bamboo, plywood, etc., etc. That's not too important right now. You don't need to learn all about that right now. But the deck is simply the actual board itself that you're standing on. And it's very important that you know the different sizes because this will help you with learning tricks, your balance, how comfortable you feel while riding. And so to get into it a little bit further, skateboard decks typically start from a range of about 7.5 inches to all the way up to 10 inches in width. There are a couple other measurements, but really those are the main ones. So when you go to the skate shop and you see on the deck it says 7.75 or 8 or 8.25, 8.5, these are all measurements of the width of the board in inches. And simply put, this varies depending on your shoe size and how comfortable you want to feel while riding the board. Some people prefer a 7.75 or a 7.75 width board because it will flick a lot faster, but the board is a lot skinnier, so you have less room to land. Some people, that have smaller feet might prefer this. If you're one that has bigger feet, you might want to go with like an 8.25 or an 8.5. This will give you a lot more room to land. You might feel a little bit more comfortable in balancing, but it might rotate a little slower because the board is a little wider, if that makes sense. Generally speaking, I would recommend for a very beginner an 8.0 or just an 8 is probably the standard width that I would recommend. It's probably the most common deck width. Typically the people that are riding 7.75 are either people that want to really flick their board really fast or they're kids with smaller feet. But typically you'll see skaters start with a 8.0 inch width deck. So I'd recommend starting with an 8, and if you feel like, okay, this board is a little too skinny for my liking, or maybe you want to try a board that's just a little wider and see how you feel, I'd recommend just going in very small increments because typically the most common sizes will be 8.0, 8.25, 8.5, and then 9 and 7.75. But if you look hard enough, you should be able to find a board that has like an 8.25 and an 8.36 or an 8.4. There are a couple of boards that are a little harder to find that are just barely wider. So for me, I started with the 7.75, realized the board was way too skinny. I went to an 8. 8 was perfect. Then I wanted to see if there was any other size that would really work for me. I went to 8.25. I loved 8.25. And then from there, I just went from 8.25 to an 8.36-ish and I went a little bit up. Now I'm at an 8.5 and I skate a lot of warped or different shaped boards just because that's what I'm liking at the moment. But besides the width of your deck, you should also be looking at the concavity of the deck. And so you'll hear this term a lot when people talk about the concave of your board. And this is simply referring to how much the board actually bends. You don't want to pick up a board that's just completely flat, right? You want to see some sort of flexible, curvature. You want to see some sort of shape with the board. You don't want your board to be a complete U, but you also don't want it to just be a flat line either. You want it to be a little curved, right? This is going to help you tremendously, especially if you're learning flip tricks. If you're trying to learn kick flips, you want to look for a board that has a lot of concavity, which means you can see the curvature in the board. I'll put some examples up in the screen here. This will help you with popping and flicking your board. If it's completely flat, you're not going to have the pop and the flips that you are looking for. So those are the main two things. Just try to find the right width, starting with an 8. If 8 doesn't work, if you think it's too wide, wide, then work your way down to 7.75. If you're thinking it's not wide enough, then go to 8.25. And then also look at the concavity of the board. Is it curved? Is it flat? If it's flat, you might want to look for another board. That's about it. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if I missed anything, and peace.